Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It's me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia. That, of course, is Kyle Yates and Andrew Erickson. And as always, it's you. And today, it's the start-sit for Week 15 of the NFL. Of course, this is the first round of the playoffs, so very important decisions to be made, and a whole lot of news breaking pretty much every 10 minutes. And we'll do our best during this pod to keep you up to date with it. It is exactly 2:04 Eastern Wednesday. So keep that in mind as you're listening to this show, as more news is going to filter in, not only throughout this recording, but also throughout the few days.
Leonard Fournette did not practice on Wednesday.
There we go.
We already got news.
There we go. So it's going to be on the fly today, boys. I feel like this is kind of where we're at. We have enormous goings-on with the Cleveland Browns and COVID kind of running rampant through that organization right now. A lot of question marks there. Andrew Erickson, have you been able to keep up with your cellular device on all of the news and notes for the NFL today?
No, I mean, I'll submit my rankings on pff.com, and then I'll check my phone and be like, gotta submit my rankings again. Gotta submit my rankings again. It's like, I release a rankings piece every single week, just kind of like my initial thoughts on everything. And it's like, all right, well, half of this is useless now. So, like, back to the drawing board.
Well, we're going to do our best, though, to give you the different scenarios. Yates, I think that's what we have to do, is I think in this show, we have to paint the hypotheticals, and that's going to get us through. So we're going to try to give you all the scenarios that may or may not happen, and then maybe the approach, Yates. I think that might be the only way to really give everybody the value they deserve here in the first week of the playoffs.
Seriously, and what a week for this to happen, right? For this kind of outbreak to happen, the first week of the fantasy playoffs, where we need to be like confident in who we are starting. And someone put out on Twitter the other day, I can't remember who it was, otherwise I would give them credit, but they said, like, if you've got a starter, you're playing them in fantasy football this week. Like, if you have players on your roster that are starting, you're playing them this week. So no, we'll do our best here to break down all the situations, but we'll just say this, like, Friday's podcast and the Sunday morning live streams, those are going to be crucial. Make sure you come back and listen to those.
That's right, and I'll be wearing some sort of Christmas sweater on the Sunday live stream, so don't miss that over on YouTube. I always like to celebrate around the holidays. Also, when we're not around to help you, My Playbook is at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. With the Start Sit Assistant, it helps power this very show. It gives you instant recommendations on your team's best lineup for the week and the percentage of experts who would start each player on your roster, so you can edit, make all the changes you need, and feel confident with all those decisions with My Playbook. And don't forget also, if you've got crazy things going on in the holidays, Junior's got a weird tournament for the holidays for basketball, all of a sudden you're like, why are they doing this? It's the holidays. We have Autopilot. That's right. Autopilot's there for you if you have to go see Santa Claus, if you have to go visit family, to take care of you when you can't take care of your roster. It's an easy way to manage your lineup, save time, and especially if you're in a lot of leagues. And we know if you're a listener of ours, you're probably in a ton of playoff scenarios right now, and it can automatically set your lineup for you just in case any last-minute things happen. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, that seems to be a likely scenario. So Autopilot is extremely valuable, as is the Start Sit Assistant right here on fantasypros.com/myplaybook. And of course, if you just can't get enough of us and you need to talk it out, I highly recommend Discord, which is, of course, where you can interact with us right there directly at fantasypros.com/chat. Again, that's fantasypros.com/chat. It's free to join our Discord chat, but if you are an upgraded member here of Fantasy Pros, you can actually interact with us. You can be on the stages, which have been incredibly useful, where literally you can come up and just talk with us about your team, about your decisions, your starts, your sits, or just kind of take a victory lap on how good your team is this year. It doesn't matter. It's that interaction. We've had some phenomenal ones this season. It's a great community of people who love fantasy football and have a really good time doing it. And I don't just mean the three of us here. I'm talking about all of the analysts, and on top of it, all of the people who are listening and being a part of it as well. So join that Discord today. Again, that's fantasypros.com/chat. Join it for free. Check it out. And then next year, if you haven't already, subscribe, and that way you can get into all those stages and those AMAs with all of us. So let's get it together, boys, and let's do our best here. Let's soldier on to running back with all the starts and sits. Andrew Erickson, let's kick things off with you. Who is in the top 20 of running back this week that you are a little concerned with or might be fading going into week 1 of the playoffs?
It's everybody's favorite rookie running back, Javonte Williams, because it's still a split backfield. We saw it firsthand when Melvin Gordon came back. He led the team in goal line carries, led the team in total touches, and yet we're like, but it doesn't matter. Javonte's still a top 15 running back. Now, last week I got it because they were playing the Lions. So both him and Melvin Gordon were able to basically just run all over the Detroit Lions run defense, but that's not the case with Cincinnati. They're top 5 in terms of rushing yards allowed per game this season, top 3 in fantasy points allowed per game over the last 4 weeks. So when it's a really good matchup, you can play these platoon backfields. You can play both guys, but when it's not a great matchup, one of these guys, I'm afraid that Javonte and Melvin Gordon both may not be top 20 running backs. So the discrepancy between the two, number one, is kind of interesting to me, but I have them both ranked outside my top 20. So wow. Javonte is the guy for me.
I got to say, Andrew, we're not starting off on a good note, you and I, today. You know I'm a big fan of Javonte Williams, and you fading him as the first guy we talk about on the show is crushing to me. I got all these shares. I don't like this at all. Yates, make me feel better. Find somebody else here besides Javonte Williams that you want to crush my hopes and dreams with.
Okay, I was about to say, like, if you want me to defend the Javonte Williams, you're going to be kind of out of luck there. You know, you said, like, make me feel better. If it was about defending Javonte Williams as a top 20 play, you were going to be a little bit disappointed. I'm on Andrew's side there. No, for me, I'm going to go with Aaron Jones. And this is really interesting with Jones going into last week. We got news that it's going to be like a 1A, 1B backfield here in Green Bay. And even as we started to see earlier on in the season, A.J. Dillon start to acclimate himself into this offense, start to see more work. Specifically as a pass catcher, that was really interesting, right, where we saw Jones be the predominant guy on first and second down, and then Dillon being utilized as the pass catcher. And so we got that word going into last week, and that was one of the situations where I wanted to keep a close eye on what happened to see what the breakdown in that backfield was. Aaron Jones, in Week 14, 8 total opportunities, 5 carries, 3 targets. A.J. Dillon had 15 carries to Jones's 5. He was bailed out by 2 touchdowns, but that is not enough volume for me to feel comfortable with having Aaron Jones as a top 15 running back, especially for me as if I'm heading into the fantasy playoffs as my RB1 potentially, right? Depending on what happened at the running back position above you on your depth chart, you know, for your fantasy roster, you might have Aaron Jones as your RB1, and that is extremely concerning to me. So we look at the, he's RB14 in ECR right now. He's RB17 in my early rankings for Week 15, and the Ravens are allowing just the 6th fewest fantasy points this season to opposing running backs. So we've got a really weird situation here where Dillon has started to become the main guy on the ground. He's actually started to become the main running back here. Aaron Jones is going to have to find the end zone in order to be able to crack the top 20. And for me, that is a very, very risky game to play.
All right, let's play a risky game of hypothetical right now. Let's say you've got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon in one spot for those two guys. Just one of them, I should say. And you're looking at this matchup against Baltimore, good against the run, obviously struggling mightily against the pass this year. Aaron Jones has been very good as a pass catcher in his career. A.J. Dillon, surprisingly so this year. So who would you start over those two guys then?
If we're looking at what happened this past week, Dillon wasn't even targeted. So I think with Aaron Jones, he only saw, I think, 3 targets, like I said, but it's still not a ton of volume. And we saw Allen Lazard have a good game. We saw both of the tight ends get involved for Green Bay. So for me, I'm going to go with, if we look at where Green Bay is going to attack this week, it's going to be the secondary. It's going to be in the passing game, right? And so I think we're going to see Aaron Rodgers have a very, very good game. The wide receivers are all going to be valuable. For me, I'm going to go with the pass catching back, and that is Aaron Jones at this point in time, right? It's flipped. It was A.J. Dillon at one point. Now it's back to Aaron Jones. I'm going to go with Aaron Jones here over A.J. Dillon, but that gap is a lot closer than what I think a lot of other people think it is.
All right, I would agree with you. It's still Jones for me, but certainly closer than people might realize. For me, it's going to be Josh Jacobs this week. He is RB15. The matchup's on the road against Cleveland. Cleveland, a very good defense. Now, once again, the caveat is we don't know in the next few days how many more COVID tests there are going to be here, positive maybe on the defensive side too. But this Cleveland defense is very good. This is the second consecutive road game for the Las Vegas Raiders, and it just, once again, it feels like the Raiders are kind of just falling apart at the seams a little bit. If you watched them last week, I think the journey of this season for them, between the John Gruden stuff and the Henry Ruggs stuff, and, you know, they rallied around each other for a short period of time, but I think that was a short window where the team just kind of came together, and now injuries to Waller, to Drake, to other players on this roster, I think you're really starting to see that kind of take its toll on them, and I think it's tough 2 weeks in a row to go on the road here, especially in this one against a very good defense in Cleveland that's really fighting for their playoff life right now. Let's switch gears right now to the guys who are on that fringe, the RB3s, who might be starting as RB2s this week, potentially with all the injuries and uncertainty we have, and of course the flex position guys. So Andrew, give me 2 guys that you feel good about. Let's spin some positivity here for folks that you feel good about starting in Week 15 here at running back.
Well, I mean, I don't know how you can't feel great about James Robinson this week. Just based on his, his heavy workload last week, 6 carries for 4 yards. So the thing with James Robinson is I do think that the coaching staff does want to get him going. And I think that last week is really a poor indication of that type of strategy because they fell behind that game. Like, they were down in the first half. The Titans had all the time of possession. Like, the Jaguars ran 20 plays in the first half. Like, literally not enough to get any type of ground game established. James Robinson's first carry, he got lost for like -4 yards. So, of course, Jacksonville's like, all right, well, we're down. We need to throw the ball in the second half. So that's why we didn't see really Robinson get involved that much. But the constant, like, coaching rhetoric that's coming out about we got to feed Robinson, we got to feed Robinson, we got to feed Robinson. I think that when the matchup presents itself like it does this week against the Houston Texans, most rushing yards allowed to running backs, I really just don't think you can try to outthink of this situation and sit James Robinson. Like, we know it's not a talent thing. He's PFF's 12th highest graded running back this year. We know the dude can deliver and ball out when he gets opportunities. And I think that this is really the spot where he would get the opportunities, like this week and next week against the New York Jets. So I know Robinson's been really frustrating to own. If you were still in the playoffs with James Robinson, I still think you need to put him in your lineup, especially with a lot of question marks at running back this week. So I think James Robinson, yes, last week was really gross, but it's a new week. It's a brand new match. I mean, the matchup couldn't be better. And I think that not enough people looked at the Titans matchup last week. The Titans are another top 5 defense against running backs in terms of rushing yards allowed per game. So that also factored in along with the game script of them trailing, where Robinson really didn't get a chance to see a lot of touches in that particular. I mean, Carlos Hyde didn't have more touches than him, so like that was a positive direction at least. So I do think Robinson is worth going back to. I just kind of wanted to give people some confidence about Robinson.
Well, I think it's smart that you did, Andrew, because I feel like a lot of people will sit him this week out of fear. Well, it's gross, but they'll sit him out of fear this week, and they'll have remorse for doing it. I feel like on Sunday, there's a really good chance, almost a 75-80% chance that they'll regret that decision. So I think it's really good that you're saying this and saying, look, go back to it. I know it's been bad. I know it's been frustrating, but the matchup is good enough that it bears witness to actually starting him. So I actually think that's a big positive that you brought him up today. Who else do you think is a good start this week at running back?
Yeah, I also like Deontay Foreman for the Tennessee Titans. Now, the backfield is a little bit of a committee between him, Dontrell Hilliard, Jeremy McNichols, but I mean, you guys, we watched that Thursday night game, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I mean, those lanes, man, wide open for Dalvin Cook. So I just can't imagine how Deontay Foreman can't get at least some production done. Like, he had a good matchup last week. He scored the touchdown. He led the team in carries. He's done that in the last 2 matchups he's played, even with some of the other running backs involved. So, I mean, the Steelers defense is 4th worst in the league in rushing yards allowed per game. They're dead last in terms of fantasy points allowed to running backs over the last 4 weeks. So, yeah, I think I want to go back to Deontay Foreman. I know I started him in a lot of spots last week, and he came through with the score, 40-plus rushing yards on the ground. It was a fine day. So I think that as a back-end RB2, I think you should go back to Deontay Foreman because I think he is at least the 1A, I would say, in the Titans backfield.
All right, Yates, let's go over to you, who are 2 guys you feel good about in the running back position starting this week, who were either a flex or maybe a deep league RB2.
The first one I'll talk about is one who actually still might be on your waiver wire as you listen to this podcast. That's D'Ernest Johnson. D'Ernest Johnson here, the running back for the Cleveland Browns. You look at Cleveland, outbreaks happening everywhere, right? And this is a situation where, okay, are we really going to roll out a player for Cleveland in this game where we are down, Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Austin Hooper, Kareem Hunt's not playing, it's going to be pretty rough here, but that leads to opportunity, right? You look at the opportunity here for Cleveland, they need pass catchers, and D'Ernest Johnson has proven that when he's given the opportunity, he can deliver. He's going up against Las Vegas, who just allowed Derek Gore, Darrell Williams, and CEH to score 4 touchdowns combined against them. Las Vegas is really just struggling at this point. I think that they are close to folding it in. And then we have Case Keenum at quarterback here for this week, most likely. And so they're going to want to lean on the run game. I think this is a big game for Nick Chubb, assuming that he doesn't test positive. Please don't test positive. And so Nick Chubb in this game, I think he's going to have a big game. I think D'Ernest Johnson is someone that we can look at as right on that high-end RB3 territory. And right now, he's like RB40 in ECR. So this is someone where, again, I mentioned he might even be on your waiver wire as someone that you can turn to and plug in as a flex, or as an RB2 option if you are in a pinch. The other guy for me is Chase Edmonds. Edmonds here yet to be officially activated off of IR, but sounds like he was close to returning here on Monday Night Football. I think that he is going to be active for this game. And who do they get to play? They get to play the Detroit Lions. And this game script here for Arizona, do we think that Arizona is going to go up big on Detroit? The answer is yes. And so we're going to see opportunity here for these running backs. I think James Conner is going to have a good game here again. Chase Edmonds, still going to be able to step right back into his workload. I think a lot of people are going to be hesitant about him coming right back into the lineup and potentially playing him in week 1 of their fantasy playoffs. For me, I want to give that vote of confidence to be able to say Chase Edmonds needs to be in your starting lineups because of the Detroit Lions matchup, who are allowing 0.6 receiving touchdowns per game to the running back position, which is the highest mark in the NFL, which is where Chase Edmonds makes his living. So I absolutely think that Chase Edmonds and Dearness Johnson are both guys that you can turn to that are outside of the top 24 that should be confident plays this week.
Yeah, I love you bringing up Edmonds too, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that still have him on the bench and just don't know what to do and lack the confidence. But Yates, I think you're right. I think Edmonds is a huge opportunity here because he was playing about as good as I've ever seen Chase Edmonds play before he got hurt. And this is something right now where they're going to need some more pass catchers, especially with DeAndre Hopkins' health a little possibly in the question mark territory as well. Lots of questions. Wish I had more answers for everybody, but we're going to try to get to all the questions we possibly can. Before we get to the guys who are sitting this week, I want to tell everybody about TickPick because, as you know already, everyone's back and enjoying the NFL, and if you want to enjoy the NFL in person next year, TickPick is giving away 5 chances to win 2022 season ticket NFL packages right now, and that's worth $3,000 each. That's amazing. So TickPick has partnered along with Zip, the buy now, pay later site, and basically what you're able to do now is you can go there, you can look at tickets, you can get tickets for NFL games, especially even now, because a lot of people start selling off tickets when all of a sudden maybe they're not so excited about attending some of the games for teams that have left. What a nice way to kind of close out the football season by going. But you can only check all these opportunities out at tickpick.com/pros. Again, that's tickpick.com/pros. Don't waste your time comparing ticket prices all across multiple sites because TickPick guarantees the best prices for NFL games by not charging any service fees, which I know if you're like me, you absolutely hate them. They've saved their users over $55 million and counting, and if you don't believe me, go check it out for yourself. You'll be 100% guaranteed happy with your purchase there. So once again, download the app and use that promo code PROS for $10 off your first order when you select Zip at checkout over at tickpick.com. That's tickpick.com/pros. All right, let's get negative again. Yates, I'll start with you on this one. Who do we want to sit at the running back position who's in that flex territory this week that you just can't seem to bear putting in the lineup?
The first one we don't have to spend a ton of time on. You talked about D'Onta Foreman. Andrew, I'll talk about one of those running mates. I'll talk about Dontrell Hilliard. This was someone who last week I got a ton of questions about on the YouTube live stream on Sunday morning and said, you know what, I can't do it with Jeremy McNichols coming back into the lineup. We don't know who is going to get this workload. And it turned out to be neither of them, right? Because you look at that game script for Tennessee and they were up big. They didn't need the pass catching back. But in this game, potentially they need him a little bit more, but there are still concerns about now this being a committee. I think D'Onta Foreman has his role locked up as that goal line guy. And then it's between Dontrell Hilliard and Jeremy McNichols. So if you're looking at Hilliard as someone who maybe the game script plays out this way, there's still a ton of question marks about who exactly is going to get that role. This is a situation I would prefer to avoid. The other guy I will talk about is one that a lot of people are starting to buy into. We talked about him on the Waiver Wire podcast this week. We talked about him on the Waiver Wire podcast the previous week, Rashaad Penny. I think Penny, people are going to look at the performance that he had this past week and go, all right, sign me up. Let's roll Rashaad Penny into our starting lineups in week 1 here. And I'm just going to pump the brakes just a little bit here. Penny is facing the Rams defense that's allowing just 77.6 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. He always does have the injury risk, right? He even left last week's game for a little bit, was on the sideline, kind of stretching things out. So there's a huge risk here with Penny. He's RB26 in ECR. I'm fading him just slightly. I've got him at RB29 in my rankings. This is not as easy of a matchup as it was last week against Houston.
Now, I understand there's risk, Yates, but is the reward also with Penny? I understand on paper it looks like one thing, but when you're looking around for other running backs and so few are getting the volume that Penny potentially has, is it worth that risk to play him, play the volume, and maybe even play the total of that game as well, which could potentially be greater than people realize?
Again, it depends on who you have, right? Who else do you have on your roster? If you were in a pinch, and that was kind of the qualification that we gave on the Waiver Wire podcast, is like, if you need Penny, go get him because he's going to be a starting running back. He's going to see work. But we look at guys like Michael Carter. Michael Carter's coming back off IR this week. I will play Carter over Rashaad Penny this week, and that's honestly not that close for me. I've got Carter at 23, Penny at 29. So that's a situation where, depending on who you have on your roster, yes, you can still roll out Rashaad Penny. I'm not saying that he's going to completely bust, but yet the upside isn't there for him to deliver 137 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns.
Right.
That's just kind of pumping the brakes there a little bit.
I think we'll settle for 80 and a touchdown. We'd be overjoyed for that.
Right.
But you know what? Usually we save this. Let's jump right into this, and then we'll come back to Andrew's guys. Let's play a little Who Should I Start, which uses our Who Should I Start tool, which is free at fantasypros.com/start. Easy for me to say, but still, doesn't matter. Let's play a game here with Rashaad Penny, shall we, Yates? Rashaad Penny or A.J. Dillon, who would you rather start this week?
I think I'm going to take A.J. Dillon. I think I will take Dillon in, even though it is a tougher matchup, right? But I think that Dillon is going to see more than enough work. And so I will go with Dillon there over Rashaad Penny.
All right, how about you there, Erickson? Would you rather start Rashaad Penny, who has the unfettered workload, or would you rather have A.J. Dillon in what could be a higher total here for Green Bay?
I'm going with Penny because I think that he ultimately will get more volume than AJ. I mean, AJ Dillon is taking on. I mean, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon are in a committee. Like it's pretty clear that those guys are. That's why we were concerned about Aaron Jones earlier on. But Rashaad Penny's like taking over this backfield. Like Alex Collins is nothing. Like that he's literally so bad at football. Like I'm so sorry about Alex Collins, but like he is irrelevant. Adrian Peterson, okay, like he signed there and he was inactive because of a back injury. Like this is what Pete Carroll's been waiting for, to like have a legit running back that he can actually feed carries that's actually like somewhat good, that has juice. So I have Rashaad Penny one spot ahead of AJ Dillon because he's the guy. And I know the matchup is tough against the Rams, but what trumps efficiency is volume. And that's what Rashaad Penny's getting. And he didn't see any targets last week because of the specific matchup, but if the Seahawks are trailing, I would expect him to be involved in the passing game because he did run the most routes among the Seahawks running backs. So that could be kind of his escape to kind of overcome the tough matchup.
That's what I was going to allude to too, Andrew. And I'll break the tie here. I'm going to go with Penny because I agree with you on this one. I think they're going to be from behind. I think you're going to see potentially Rashaad Penny catch more balls than people realize, almost in that Chris Carson kind of role, right? What they envisioned for him, what he did last year where he was catching a lot more balls. I think this is Penny's window. This is Pete Carroll's window with Penny. I actually agree with you. I like starting A.J. Dillon, but I think I would prefer to go with Rashaad Penny because I just fear, once again, Aaron Jones every passing week a little healthier, a little bit better, and in this matchup here against Baltimore, I think I'm going to go ahead with Penny. But you know what, Yates? Don't worry, because 63% of the experts agree with you. So Andrew and I are in the minority, only 37%, and I guess Andrew and I are part of that 37 for now. All right, let's jump back to your guys that you want to sit here, Andrew, and then we'll play another game of Who Should I Start. So who do you want to sit right now, Andrew, at the running back position?
I want to sit Chuba Hubbard for the Carolina Panthers. Look, I mean, he was in a great spot last week. Atlanta Falcons, soft defense, and I mean, he doesn't score a touchdown there, and I mean, he's nothing. He does nothing for your roster. He had 10 carries for 33 yards. Amir Abdullah is the guy that they use on pass catching downs. Ran a route in 62% of the Panthers dropbacks. He's the guy they like, and he's also working on early downs as well. It's not like he's only seeing work on third down. He's operating on first and second down occasionally. Hubbard, you have the issue of Cam Newton potentially stealing goal line touches. The Bills defense, I know, has been like decimated by running backs over the last couple of weeks, but I mean, they've been beaten by like the best of the best running backs, like the Fournets, Jonathan Taylor, the Patriots running backs, like really top tier running teams where the Panthers really haven't been that. If anything, the Panthers like can't run block. They actually have PFF's worst O-line, D-line matchup chart this week. From an advantage standpoint, it's actually the worst among all teams, and usually don't see that. Most teams have a decent matchup when it comes to the offensive line over the defensive line in terms of run blocking, and Carolina is one of the surprise standouts that doesn't have that. So I just think that's an uphill battle. Hubbard can only get there basically on rushing yards, and if they fall behind in this game, again, if Josh Allen is active and playing, I expect the Bills to have a lead, and then he's literally not on the field. So there's just a lot of ways where I see Hubbard failing. So I think that you kind of count your blessings that he got the touchdown last week and you put him on your bench.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so those are your guys. Wait, you got one more too, don't you? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll mention quickly. So Miles Sanders, I just, I don't know what the workload's going to be like with Gainwell, Scott, Howard, whoever's coming back. Is Hurts playing? Like, there's just a bunch of question marks about who's getting the majority of carries in this backfield. Sanders oftentimes doesn't get goal line touches. He is unreliable in the passing game, and the football team ranks second only to Tampa Bay in terms of fewest rushing yards allowed per game to running backs. So there's just, again, like Hubbard, there's a lot of ways where I see Sanders failing, and really only one particular path where he rips off like an 80-yard touchdown where I see him actually getting there for you in fantasy. So again, with a full complement of no more teams on bye, like I think Sanders is probably a guy that you can potentially sit as a luxury.
I got to tell you, Andrew, I do not feel good about that Eagles backfield. Not any of them, and the uncertainty of the quarterback position does not make me feel any better. Let's jump back again, and I'll try this again. Who should I start? Using the fantasypros.com/start tool. There you go. I did it this time. See, look at that. Redemption right here on the podcast. Let's do another one here. Damien Harris or Tony Pollard? Andrew, I'll start with you at this one. Who would you rather start at running back, Damien Harris or Tony Pollard?
Man, I just love picking between two injured guys.
Right.
Well,
so
welcome
ideal.
to 2021, my friend.
I guess I'm gonna go with Harris, because I think that he is still technically the lead back in his backfield. I know Pollard is the more explosive back in his backfield, but they still give Ezekiel Elliott the lion's share of work, even though he's less efficient. And both of them are dealing with injuries right now. So, again, if Harris is suiting up, I assume that he's healthy, or probably healthier than Pollard coming off a bye week. I know he opened this week with a limited practice, so we'll kind of proactively monitor his status throughout the week. I mean, hopefully you just kind of know if their guys are inactive that you don't have to play them. You can play Ramondre Stevenson as a top 20 guy. I think that's a no-brainer. But, based on the information at hand, I would probably go with Harris.
All right, Yates, let's play the information at hand as both these guys are on the field on this weekend. And remember, we got Harris starting on Saturday, so we might have to make this decision earlier than later. Harris or Tony Pollard, who would you rather start?
Yeah, it's super close between these two guys. Probably both are going to be just around that RB30 range for me anyway, so not exactly solid starts, but I will give the slight edge to Tony Pollard, assuming that he is fully healthy. You look at the game script of what that game could be against the New York Giants. I think that Dallas could go up big, just kind of what we saw this past week against Washington, and then they give Ezekiel Elliott some time off. They turn to Tony Pollard here. That's kind of the way that I will view this. Damian Harris going up against Indianapolis. Tough run defense, has to split that backfield with Ramondre Stevenson. I will give the slightest edge to Tony Pollard.
All right, again, I'm breaking the tie. This is a feisty show today. My goodness, I'm going to go with Damien Harris. Again, that lead back thing, that's where I kind of lean towards once again, and it's close, and everybody knows I'm the biggest Tony Pollard guy out there, but I'm even more concerned about his foot injury than anything else. Don't like the foot injuries when it comes to guys who run for a living. That's not very good. 72% of people actually agree with us, though. This time, Andrew, we're in their majority. Yates is in the minority, so everything is flipped around. And just in case you're following at home and wondering where is the dad joke from Andrew Erickson, it's right here in my show sheet. I see here he has a little thing here, Penny for your thoughts under Rashaad Penny. He just couldn't help himself. The dad jokes continue, and I'm just so damn proud of you, Andrew. I really am. Just Yates, you really got to step up the dad joke game in 2022.
Hey, I
just
sent a dad joke in our Slack DM earlier today. Did
That's
you
right.
see it?
That's right, you did, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
All
All right.
I tried to catch the fog yesterday.
You did. I saw the fog. Yes, missed.
I missed.
That's good. That's good. We're getting there. We're getting there. See, look at us. Look at us. Who'd have thought? All right, let's go to the wide receivers here, and let's start with the guys that we're fading at the top. I'll kick things off here. Why not? DeAndre Hopkins. I don't like the fact he's getting MRIs on his leg. That doesn't make me feel very warm and fuzzy, now does it? This guy he has not been healthy all year. I mean, if you watch DeAndre Hopkins play football in your life and then watch 2021, it's not been the same guy. And I know it's very tempting because the matchup against Detroit is like, oh my God, look, his matchup against Detroit. They probably don't need him to play in this game very much. If he does make it onto the field, he could just be a decoy anyway. This scares the heck out of me. This is one of those few instances where I wouldn't start my stud because I really don't think the stud is healthy enough to be on the field should he get there. And again, this is a big should, a big giant quotation marks around should. But we'll see what happens. But for now, he is ranked all the way at 16, and I have him far lower than that this week. Yates, we'll start with you on this one. Wide receivers that you're fading in the top 30. Who's the name?
I will go with Marquise Brown here as an honorable mention. He is someone whose production has just taken a nosedive over the previous 4 games, someone that we really cannot trust as a wide receiver 2 anymore. He's still at wide receiver 21 in ECR. I've got him much lower than that. But the guy that I will single out here is Terry McLaurin. He has finished as the wide receiver 42, the wide receiver 58, and then had a 0-catch performance this past week before leaving with that concussion. Now, he is in concussion protocol here, so this is a situation where we might not even have Terry McLaurin on Sunday. So I'm going to cheat just a little bit, but I wanted to bring him up here because even if he does play, this situation here in Washington is really, really terrifying, right? We got Kyle Allen on the COVID list earlier today. And then Taylor Heineke is banged up. These are both quarterbacks for the Washington football team. And then that means that Kyle Shermer would be the next man up at quarterback for Washington. And so as we look at that situation here, everything is just lining up to say, even if McLaurin plays, I have to get him out of my lineup. He's not producing even with Taylor Heineke at the quarterback position. Even if Heineke does play, he's not going to be 100%. Then we could have the Kyle Shermer experience here. This is just a situation where we say, no, I'll get Terry McLaurin out of my starting lineup if I can.
Kyle Shermer experience, not my favorite band from college. I can tell you that right now. All right, let's get to you over here. Andrew, tell me about the wide receiver in the top 30 that you are fading this week.
Yeah, for me, it's gonna be Michael Pittman.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
earmuffs,
Yates.
Earmuffs.
Sorry, but I just hate the spot for him against the Patriots.
Fun fact, really quick. It's actually not that fun. I have to choose and sit. I'm actually sitting Michael Pittman in a league this week because I have like Hunter Renfrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson. I feel so bad, and I feel like I'm betraying everything that I stand for. But I kind of agree with you.
But people have been asking me all week already about Pittman, and I keep going to the same thing, which is J.C. Jackson, Phillips, Duggar, if Duggar is healthy. I mean, this secondary is really good in New England. This is a tough spot here for Michael Pittman.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough spot for him, and he hasn't been bulletproof this year. I know he's the alpha in the Colts offense, but the Colts passing offense is probably below average overall with Wentz. I mean, the team is really focused on getting Jonathan Taylor the ball as much as they humanly possibly can. You know, you look at Pittman, for the last 4 weeks, he's finished as wide receiver 30 or worse. He only has one top 30 performance in the last 4 weeks. Patriots fourth in terms of fantasy points allowed per game to wide receivers, second over the last 4 weeks. And J.C. Jackson, like you mentioned, has the second lowest passer rating generated when targeted this season. He's projected to match up with Michael Pittman the most out of the Patriots defensive backs. So it's just not a matchup where, I mean, anytime the Patriots play this season, it's just every game is like this back and forth chess match where it's not shootouts. Like the Patriots are just like not inviting any type of shootout environment. It's all just like both teams are going to run the football, play defense, and it's just not fantasy friendly. I mean, like Bill Belichick basically made us watch a game where they threw the ball 3 times. It's just like not ideal for fan. I mean, unless you have DSTs, like Patriots DST, like boom, fire them
that's
off.
Been fine. That's been great. I can tell you firsthand. It's been wonderful to just set it and forget it for 14 weeks up until the bye. Yeah. And then you finally had to get one. That's my idea of fun when it comes to managing defense special teams. But you're right, Andrew. I mean, this is definitely a tough matchup for Pittman. And McLaurin, you mentioned him too, Yates. I mean, that's been really depressing because McLaurin's been that quarterback-proof, matchup-proof guy, and he's just kind of fallen apart here in the stretch run, which is really sad because we love the talent, but right now things are not going well for that Washington offense. So let's switch gears and try to find the power of positivity and find some guys we do want to start. Let's go back to you, Yates. Give me 2 guys at the wide receiver position this particular week that you feel good about starting as a wide receiver 3/flex play in week 15.
Yeah, as we look outside the top 30 in ECR, there are a couple names that stand out to me. One of them is Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 targets in each of his past 2 games, including a 31.6% target share in Week 14. I will gladly take that target share percentage. And then we look at the fact that TJ Hockenson and DeAndre Swift both did not practice today on Wednesday. So both are looking kind of doubtful here for Week 15. And who do they take on? They take on Arizona. I talked about this earlier on the other side of it with Chase Edmonds. On the flip side of that is the fact that Detroit is probably going to have to throw the ball 50-plus times in this matchup. And when you do not have proven wide receivers outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is getting the job done and is essentially hauling in everything that's thrown his way, this leads to an incredible full PPR value. So he's someone that I am confidently plugging into my lineup as a top 36 play in full PPR formats, and then just outside of that in half PPR or even further down in standard.
All right. And for you, any other guys?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So Gabriel Davis is the other guy that I wanted to highlight because this is completely dependent upon Emmanuel Sanders' availability, right? If Sanders plays, we just don't know if Gabriel Davis is going to see enough work here, enough snaps to be relevant for us to at least trust in fantasy. But it was really interesting as I sat down and did some research on Gabriel Davis this week. I found out that he ranks 19th in the NFL at the wide receiver position in red zone targets. He has 38 targets on the season overall. 38 targets overall on the season, and 12 of those have come in the red zone. That is more than DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, and Terry McLaurin, just to name a few wide receivers here. So this is a guy that if he is going to step into the role that Emmanuel Sanders has here, we know that he is going to get looks in the red zone. And if he has the opportunity to be involved outside of the red zone as well, then we are talking about a very, very valuable flex play, potentially even a top 36 guy this week. And I guarantee that he's on waiver wires in plenty of leagues here.
I'm glad you highlighted him, and I'll tell you what, a spoiler alert too, he's one of these guys that I've highlighted for the DFS show that's recording tomorrow because of that same reason, which is the red zone looks potentially coming his way, and I think everyone's realized enough with the Emmanuel Sanders stuff. Health or not, enough is enough. The Bills have their back against the wall. You got to start getting some of these other guys involved and see what you could do, especially in the second half of that Tampa game. I think you finally started to see that happen a little bit, and his price is right. So if you're out of playoffs, spoiler alert, then you're looking for something to do. Gabriel Davis might be one of those guys, and you're plugging in playing some DFS this week. All right, let's go over to you here, Andrew. Give me 2 names that you feel good about starting in Week 15 at the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, so first guy is Christian Kirk. I mean, I really don't think DeAndre Hopkins is going to play. I think that they're going to realize that they don't need him to beat the Lions. They've held him out before. There's a team that's going to make the playoffs pretty much no matter what. Maybe they don't get the number 1 seed, but at this point, I mean, it's tough to lock up the number 1 seed. I think they kind of blew the opportunity by not being able to beat the Rams. So I think that they're just looking forward to the future of the playoffs. Let's get Hopkins healthy because that's when we need him the most. So Christian Kirk, I think, makes a lot of sense here against the Detroit Lions. Now, I look back at the games that Hopkins missed earlier this season. There's like 3 games, including the one that he played like 25% of the snaps, where it was all the guys, including AJ Green, because Green also missed a game because of COVID, like during the stretch where Hopkins missed games. And again, there wasn't really like a clear winner in terms of like targets. I think that Rondale Moore obviously saw the most like uptick in playing time, but in terms of like target share, it was all again like really flat because like the Cardinals offense has been all year. It's been pretty spread out between all the guys playing. But I specifically like the matchup for Christian Kirk because Detroit's been really bad against slot receivers specifically. So they rank 26 in pass rating allowed to receivers in the slot. And they rank 5th in terms of receivers lined out wide. So, I mean, you look at AJ Green versus Christian Kirk and like everything is so close. Like the targets, the air yards, everything is so close to the vest. But this particular matchup, I think, calls upon Christian Kirk in the slot, and even like Rondale Moore to an extent. So if you're like playing in a really deep league, I think Rondale Moore, if Hopkins is out, Rondale Moore makes a lot of sense, you know, as an explosive receiver that when he's on the field, he gets the ball. Like he's a really high target rate per route run this year. And they're just looking for ways to get him the ball, especially when Hopkins misses. So I think Christian Kirk makes sense in a good matchup against the Detroit Lions. I mean, someone's going to pop from the Cardinals. It's just a matter of which guy.
So the pecking order there, Andrew, would be Kirk, Moore, Green for you if no Hopkins?
Probably, yeah, something like
that. Or would Edmonds slide into there somewhere?
Yeah, right. There's a lot of fluidity to the situation. And I think even too, like I know you didn't mention it, but James Conner is also day to day with an injury. So I mean, you could literally see like Chase Edmonds go from like basically a forgotten man to like top 12 running back in the fantasy football playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I have no hesitations of starting Edmonds this week, especially if Conner. I mean, day to day usually means like guys miss games. So I mean, if you're listening to this right now, you have James Conner. Like I would try to get a backup plan in place if you don't have James Conner, and if it's Chase Edmonds, even Eno Benjamin, like make sure he's not on your waiver wire just in case they don't activate Chase Edmonds. I know that he should be coming back, but these IR things are just sometimes really, really tricky. So I think that Kirk makes a ton of sense against the Detroit Lions. And then my other guy is Russell Gage for the Falcons. Again, it's always like tough to like tout Gage because you know like, oh, he does this all the time. He blows up and then he like falls back to earth. And it's exactly what happened last week. And after the 130 yards receiving in week 14, he came back 64 receiving yards, 4 catches on 6 targets. But I mean, he still has over the last 4 weeks 30% air yard share, 24% target share. Like he's still seeing the majority of looks from Matt Ryan over Kyle Pitts in this offense as of late. And I think the matchup is actually a lot better this week than it was last week. Carolina has a tough secondary. 49ers, not so much. I mean, Josh Norman is out there like covering guys, like trying to cover like Jamar Chase. Just not
trying is putting it lightly, I think.
It's not a recipe for success. The 49ers have allowed the 4th most receptions, yards, and touchdowns to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. And specifically, it's been the slot guys that have done a lot of damage. Level out over 6 receptions on average to players aligned up inside the numbers. So I think Gage, as a slot receiver, I mean, I think he's going to get double-digit fantasy points. So that's kind of what his MO is, and I think he continues it here in a good matchup.
All right, let's go to the guys we want to sit. Yates, we'll bounce back to you here. Who at the wide receiver position do you not feel good about in Week 15?
I wrote down AJ Green, but that was right before we had learned that DeAndre Hopkins was getting that second MRI. So I think that that's going to be off the table. I think that Green moves into flex conversation if Hopkins misses this game. Otherwise, if Hopkins does somehow play, I am not looking at AJ Green. He's done this in the past where he's, had a good game and then has completely disappeared the following week. The other guy that I will talk about here is MVS, at least with concern. I'm not looking to completely sit him because I do think that he falls into the boomer bust kind of bucket where we can still play him because he does present some upside. But in this offense, with MVS, we had gone from him being 19 targets over the previous 2 contests, and then in week 14 against Chicago, we had 5 targets, and it was an Allen Lazard game. So in this offense, we have DeVante Adams. We know what we're going to get every single week, and it's going to be amazing production. And then after that, it's really kind of a crapshoot as far as which receiver is going to have the good game. So MVS is one of the guys that does still fall into the boomer bust category, but where we had started to move him up rankings. He was wide receiver, I think, like 35, 34 in ECR this past week, last time that I checked right before submitting rankings on Sunday. Like, that's kind of where we had moved him up to. I think that we got to move him down back into this like wide receiver 43, 44 territory where he is truly boomer bust.
All right, fair enough. How about you, Andrew? Who do you want to sit at wide receiver this week?
Broncos. Just like all the so I tweeted out, if you go to my Twitter at Andrew Erickson _, I tweeted out like the target shares for the Broncos receivers over the last 4 weeks, and it's so gross, and it's convenient because there's 100 targets over the last 4 weeks, and so the target share equals the targets. And Jerry Jeudy 15%, Sutton 14, Fant 14, Javonte 13, Alberto 12, Tim Patrick 12. Like it's so spread out. Like the wealth is so spread out that nobody can do anything in this offense. Like it's so bad for fantasy football. It's great for real life and for the Broncos. Like they have a lot of talented guys, but when it's Teddy Bridgewater like distributing the football so evenly across the board, no one gets a chance to really be any factor for fantasy football. So I really don't want to play anyone. I mean, people haven't been playing Sutton or Tim Patrick really, but I'm even willing to now sit Jerry Jeudy because it's become a point where even though he has like the slight lean in terms of targets, he had a 22% target share last week. It's still not like enough for him to do anything. So again, I hate the matchup here. He's going to face Bengals slot cornerback Mike Hilton. It's actually one of the worst advantages per PFF's wide receiver cornerback matchup chart this week. So it's just not a good spot for Jerry Jeudy in the slot against the Bengals. So there's no volume really to fall back on with him, and you could easily see it be, okay, it's a Courtland Sutton week, and that means, Sutton gets 6 targets instead of his usual his 3 targets that he.
I was gonna say 6 is like that's a high watermark for the last 2 months for him.
So it's tough with him. And then my other guy is Julio Jones. I get that the name brand is kind of keeping him like afloat in like the top 36 wide receivers in terms of ECR, but guys, like he literally has finished as a top 35 wide receiver 1 time this year, once in 7 games. Like he's not on the Falcons anymore. Like it's not a thing, and he's still like running on a pitch count. He's not playing a full complement of snaps. Like Julio does this a lot, and that's also why he's always ranked really high in terms of PFF yards per route run, because he's always running a little bit less routes than everybody else because they need to make sure this dude's healthy. I mean, the Titans have playoff aspirations. I mean, he ran less routes last week than Nick Westbrook-Akini. So for me, I'm just like, why are we playing this guy? Like, this is not Julio Jones of the Atlanta Falcons with Matt Ryan dropping back to throw the ball 50 times a game. Like, you got to keep him on your bench until we see him actually, like, produce. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't care if he's projected to lead the team in targets because he hasn't actually done it. So, Julio Jones, I just can't trust.
All right, let's see who you trust out of these guys. Who should I start? Terry McLaurin or Chase Claypool? Andrew, we'll start with you.
Oh, give me Chase Claypool. I know, like, the the on-field antics are...
Speaking of trust.
I know the on-field antics are tough to figure out, but, like, hey, like, if you look past that, like, the dude still, like, put up numbers. Like, he got benched in the game and still had over 90 receiving yards in the game. So he's still being hyper-targeted by Big Ben. It's a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans. Most receiving yards allowed to wide receivers this season. And I think Yates hit all the reasons on McLaurin, like why you shouldn't start him. McLaurin has finished outside the top 35 8 times this year. Like he's been the so boomer bust, and coming off concussion against a tough Eagles defense, it just seems like, okay, well, this is another game where McLaurin's just going to bust, you know, with a third string quarterback under center. So for me, the upsides with Claypool. Obviously, if Claypool gets benched, well, okay, then we're out of luck. But I think that hopefully, even if he's like plays 50% of the snaps, he can get it done.
All right, Yates, Claypool, or McLaurin for you?
Yeah, let's assume full health for McLaurin here, right? And I will still take Claypool in that situation. I'm going to go with Claypool against the Tennessee Titans secondary, who just is bleeding fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I think we're going to see Ben have a good game here, and I think that's going to lead to a ton of downfield targets for Claypool. I think I like Claypool in this matchup.
Make it 3 for 3 for me. So Claypool sweeps here, but the experts right now still favoring Terry McLaurin, 57% to 43 over Claypool. Very interesting. We'll see if that
experts can't forgive Chase Claypool for the on-field
They can't
antics.
forgive him, and they can't quit Terry McLaurin. I think it's a bit of both, Andrew, to be honest. I think it's a little bit of both. They just refuse to let it go. Let's do the battle here. DeVante Parker or DeVonta Smith? Yates, who would you rather start this week?
I think I'll take Parker. Parker's providing an incredibly high floor whenever he is healthy and in the lineup, and they take on the New York Jets this week. So yes, I'll play DeVante Parker over DeVonta Smith this week.
It's Parker against the Jets for me too. Andrew, 3 for 3?
Yeah, I mean, Parker has only one game this year without 7 targets, and it was when he came off his 4-game layoff, and he still had 5 catches in that game. So he's been so surprisingly consistent. Never have we seen DeVante Parker, or at least when he's on the field. I mean, he's been consistently hurt. That's kind of his. That's
a couple years ago, he was consistently good. You got to go back to 3 years now or 2?
Whenever it was Fitzpatric, that ended the season.
Yeah, it was that 1 year with Fitzpatrick, but time is starting to run together for me.
I think that he's in another good spot. I mean, he had a productive outing coming off of IR, and he played a season low snap share at 71%. So if his snap share goes up to 90%. I expect him to potentially see double-digit targets in a matchup against the Jets, who we're dying to play anyone we can against the New York Jets, especially because Miami throws the ball a lot, regardless of the game script, and all their running backs are on the COVID list. So I think Tua is actually going to have a productive game, which means Parker will probably be pretty good as well.
There it is, 3 for 3 again. We sweep it, and the experts agree 72% for Parker over Smith. Let's move on to the quarterback position. And the guys that we're fading here. Again, it's very tough in the QB1s. We kind of have a finite group. Last week, there was hardly anybody that we kind of really were worried about. This week, I'm just slightly worried about Taysom Hill. And I say slightly because it is Tampa. And I think Tampa is kind of showing itself to be the elite right now of the NFC. These teams are starting to beat up on each other at the top a little bit. Yes, the Packers and the Rams and the Cardinals are all in this mix, but New Orleans does always play them very tough, and I understand that even when Taysom Hill doesn't play quarterback well, he plays fantasy well, and he still finishes in high rankings, but let's not forget about this too. This linebacker core of the Tampa Bay Bucks is one of the better ones in football. So in terms of tracking, in terms of QB spy and all that good stuff, I do believe that this is going to be a tougher day at the office for Taysom Hill than certainly what he's seen the last couple weeks. And I would just put that out there, too. I mean, this is a contest where, for me personally, I'm looking at the Tampa Bay Bucks to kind of cement themselves a little bit and stop struggling against the New Orleans Saints the way they have in this Brady era. For whatever reason, this team pushes them to the limit over and over and sometimes even beats them. This game is in Tampa. I think they'll have a good plan here about Taysom Hill, and they've seen enough of him as well. So, again, I can understand starting him, especially because there's teams losing Lamar Jackson potentially this week. There's some other injuries at the quarterback position, but I think right now I would be fading Taysom Hill, which I know could turn around to bite me. Andrew Erickson, anybody in the quarterback position that you want to fade this week in the top 12?
It's Lamar Jackson. He's banged up with this ankle sprain. They say it's a low ankle sprain. I don't really care. It's his mobility that I am very concerned about being limited, and he had been struggling anyway. The last couple weeks, since week 10, 12.3 fantasy points per game, and that was basically because of rushing. That was the only thing he was still doing. He was not throwing the ball efficiently. That's why we've seen Marquise Brown's numbers just plummet over the last couple games. And I get the mantra of, okay, no, Lamar's a stud. They got to start. Lamar's a stud when he runs. That's the difference. He's not a stud if he's just sitting duck back there, dropping back to throw the ball like a traditional pocket quarterback. So I'm not starting Lamar Jackson. I'm sorry. Unless he's they're saying he's practicing in full, he's running around, he looks great. Okay, then that'll change my mind. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we already have him as a DNP on Wednesday. I just don't. I mean, even if he plays, I don't want to wait till 4:25 Eastern to figure out if Lamar's going to play in this game. So I'm putting him on my bench right now, and I'm looking for alternatives right away.
Could not agree more. Yates, how about you at the QB1 spot? Who worries you this week?
I'm going to side with Andrew on this one with Lamar Jackson. Where you look at Lamar, and it is really the fact of the offense currently just looks broken. I've talked about this over the past couple of weeks, saying like it is really Lamar trying to throw underneath and then scrambling around and just trying to make something happen on his own. And so when we don't have that mobility for him, even if he does play, this is a situation where I am extremely concerned about playing him. I am assuming right now in my rankings that he does play. And guys, I have him at QB 14 on the week. So I'm starting other guys, like we'll talk about this quarterback in just a minute, where I will gladly play this kind of player over Lamar Jackson this week. The other one that I will just, as an honorable mention, Jalen Hurts. It's kind of the same kind of thing here where we look at these mobile quarterbacks that may struggle as passers from time to time, and that is where they're dealing with an injury. That's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I look at Jalen Hurts here and I just kind of say, I'll look at someone else here because I just don't trust Jalen Hurts to be at full strength, even if he does play.
All three of us down on the mobile quarterbacks this week. What's the world coming to? My goodness, very depressing here. Let's play a little Who Should I Start with some guys on the fringe of QB1 while we're here. Kirk Cousins on the road against the Chicago Bears, or Joe Burrow on the road against the Denver Broncos. Yates, who would you rather start?
I will go with Kirk Cousins here. Cousins has been great, and he's going up against Chicago, who just is bleeding fantasy points to opposing wide receivers and quarterbacks. So, yes, I will. I'll take Kirk Cousins here. I've got him at 10 on the week, and then Burrow at 15.
Not afraid of the Monday night Kirk Cousins that we've seen in the past that shows up.
It's true.
It's
true. There's a little bit of a lower floor here because of that narrative, but no, Cousins has been solid. I will look at the data from this year to be able to make my decisions.
I think that's a smart thing to do. All right, how about you here, Andrew? Joe Burrow or Kirk Cousins for you?
Cousins has never finished worse than quarterback 13 on the road this year. So, yeah, I got him ranked at quarterback 13. So yeah. I think he's the guy with me. It was close between me for him and Burrow, but I do lean slightly towards because I think he just has a better matchup.
3 for 3 there. It's just a slight lean, very slightly to me to Kirk Cousins. All right, let's do another one. We'll talk about the Superflex guys too. Carson Wentz or Teddy Bridgewater. Wentz has a tough matchup, obviously, against that Patriots secondary and leading the league in turnovers there. And they got Teddy Bridgewater, who you so astutely put before, Andrew, it's just so boring and spread all over the place and very uninspiring. So who is more inspiring between these two guys, Carson Wentz or Teddy B?
For me, I'm going to go with, I think Tags used to use this analogy where, you want the syrup that goes over all the pancakes. Like, that's Teddy Bridgewater in this situation. Like, I know he has, like, all these great weapons, so he should, like, be more of a fantasy producer, and that's why I give the slight lean. I mean, I really think that both are gross. Like, it's kind of like gross pancakes that I'm trying to eat here, like, some, like, weird flavor. I don't know. But I'll lean towards Teddy Bridgewater. I think that, I just don't want to play guys against the Patriots. Like, we've seen this over and over again. It just doesn't work, especially with a guy like Carson Wentz, who is just not someone I really trust to overcome a really tough defensive matchup.
Yates, how about you? Wentz or Teddy B?
Oh, yeah, really don't like choosing between these two guys. I've got them at 22 and 23 respectively. I will give the slight edge to Carson Wentz. But man, this is just because what has Teddy Bridgewater done recently? He's done next to nothing, even in these games where, all right, they might have to throw the ball a little bit more. I just can't confidently trust him. So I don't want to play either one of them. Don't get me wrong. But if I'm forced to choose between the two of them, I will play Carson Wentz.
If I'm forced, I will also play Carson Wentz and hope that Jonathan Taylor somehow pads his stats. That's what I'm hoping for. You just dump the ball off to Jonathan Taylor. Please, for the love of God, just do that and don't get yourself into trouble, Carson. 86% actually agree on the expert side with Carson Wentz. And for the record, too, on Kirk Cousins, 70% agree with Kirk Cousins. So there you have it. All right, let's move on to the tight end position. For me this week, it's Hockenson that I'm a little concerned with. He is tight end 6. Hand injuries for a guy who catches footballs, that doesn't sound like a good thing to me. And Arizona's D, I think, is underappreciated. I understand they came off a loss. I understand Cooper Kupp ran amok, but that's just how good Cooper Kupp is. But for the most part, the secondary, I think, is a little underappreciated still in Arizona, and they've played pretty well this year overall. That was a tough matchup there for them, and I think they'll bounce back here against Detroit. So that's the guy for me. Yates, how about for you? Who's the tight end that scares you this week at the tight end 1 spot?
So just behind the scenes here, I on Wednesdays I'm usually in the morning working on the primer and just kind of cranking through that. And so you messaged us, said the show sheets are done, and I had the immediate thought was like, oh, I need to get in there and put in my players because I always end up stealing the ones that Andrew mentions, and that's what happened here again. So I'll briefly intro it, and then he's got some solid stats. That
Early
he can back
bird
it
gets
up.
the worm, Yates.
Yes,
What can I tell you?
it's Dalton Schultz for me. Schultz is one of these guys that we think that he is still continuing to produce, and I think last week's kind of just shocking. What was one reception for 4 yards, like nothing last week, and I think that kind of woke us up to it. But Schultz was on fire to begin the year. And then outside of, over the course of his last 7 games since Dallas came out of their bye week, Schultz has cracked the top 12 at the tight end position just once. So we look at Schultz as this kind of like high floor. He's still producing. That's not the case. He's not getting the job done for fantasy. There are other investments that you can make at the position. So he's one of these guys, when you have all 3 starting wide receivers healthy, the targets are just not there. And Dak also hasn't looked fully himself here. This isn't as high powered of an offense as we saw last year. So Schultz is one of the guys that I definitely have concerns about.
That's very fair. All right, Andrew Erickson, who is it for you at the tight end position that you're a little concerned with this week?
Yeah, so just to piggyback on Kyle Yates' points about Schultz, I mean, he only has 4 targets per game in his last 2, basically when we've seen the other Cowboys receivers healthy. So I have him kind of ranked as a back end tight end 1 this week. And really it's because he's kind of become like a touchdown or bust guy, and this particular matchup against the Giants does, I think, present the best opportunity for him to find the end zone, because the Giants rank dead last in the league in terms of red zone targets allowed to tight ends. So, I mean, if you catch a touchdown as a tight end, you are a top 10 guy. That's all you really need to do. That's the only box you need to check off. So I know that Schultz has obviously been disappointing because the volume isn't there, but if I'm going to bet on anybody to score a touchdown, outside the elite tight ends, I think Schultz is probably someone I would still roll with. So I'm not necessarily looking to for the waiver wire to replace him, but again, I think that the ceiling is not super high like it was during the beginning of the season when there were other pieces missing in this offense where Schultz could really be potentially at best the number 2 target for Dak.
All right, let's talk about the guys on the fringe of tight end with a little who should I start. Tyler Conklin let me down, let a lot of us down last week. So we'll see if we're ready to go back into that pool and swim. Or Noah Fant against the Cincinnati Bengals. Andrew Erickson, I'll start with you on this one. Noah Fant or Tyler Conklin, who would you rather start this particular week?
Yeah, so I will only play Fant with the caveat that Adam Thielen is still out. If there's no Adam Thielen, I still would prefer Tyler Conklin. Look, I get that he was not great last week, but we saw KJ Osborne have a 30% target share. Go along with Justin Jefferson's 40% target share. Those things are very uneven because the week before, Tyler Conklin was the second guy behind Justin Jefferson with Adam Thielen out. So I don't think that Osborne is just going to come in and continue to see double-digit targets every single week if there is no Adam Thielen. I would expect that the targets kind of flatten out a little bit more and go back towards Conklin, where in the case of the Broncos, like we mentioned before multiple times already, it's so flat across the board. Albert O has almost as high of a target share as Noah Fant does. So I know we look at the matchup, we're Fant, Bengals second most fantasy points allowed to tight ends over the last 4 weeks. Noah Fant has had great matchups all year long and has done not much with them. Last week he barely got there. I think he was tight end 13 on the week. So if there is no Adam Thielen, I would prefer Conklin. But if the information at hand, if we still don't know, I would go with Fant.
All right, how about you here, Yates? Fant or Conklin?
This is a coin flip for me. I've got Noah Fant at 13 in my tight end rankings currently, and Conklin at 15. So both these guys can be considered, but I think that you are playing Conklin if you need the touchdown. The touchdown upside for him in that game. But with Noah Fant, it's kind of the same thing that Andrew said. What has he done here recently? He's seen 4 targets in each of his past 3 games, and he has to be incredibly efficient with his opportunity in order to be able to return even mid-range tight end 2 status. What's his scoring upside against Cincinnati? Even that is concerning. So yeah, it's a coin flip for me. I will still go Noah Fant just because Tyler Conklin really didn't come through last week, but it's super, super close.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Once again, the caveat being, as Andrew said, if Adam Thielen is out, I will go with Conklin here. I'm in the minority, just me and 19% of the experts, as opposed to the 81% with you guys and fans. So there you have it. Let's get to our most exciting part of the show, the must-starts and must-sits of the week. I will go first, and let's start with Van Jefferson, who we didn't talk about at all, and we should. Yes, he had a touchdown, and I understand it wasn't a huge target share in the game against Arizona, but this is a great matchup for him against Seattle. So I am all in here on Van Jefferson this week. I think he's a guy you could start your flex, especially in the full point PPR, or even the half. I think he brings you a lot there potentially. And I'm sitting Philadelphia Eagles running backs because it's messy, it's horrendous. I don't know who's going to be there, how they're going to shake out. So anything I can do to avoid starting Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, Kenneth Gainwell, LaShawn McCoy, Brian Westbrook, Deuce Staley, Ricky Waters, Keith Byers. I mean, I can go back. DeMarco Murray. I don't know how many Eagles running backs I don't want to play, but I don't want to play any of them. I can tell you that right now. I'm just moving on. And there is a part of me, though, I told you guys before the show started, I am very excited about the potential. If we get Gardner Minshew again, who plays really well, what kind of pot that stirs. Because I don't know. I'm the Loki of fantasy sports. I just love chaos, and I just want to see it happen. I just want to come talk about it on Monday. How about you, boys? Let's start with you there, Andrew Erickson. Who are your must-starts and sits for Week 15?
For me, it's Justin Fields. I
Yes.
think that he is just a great play. And honestly, like with the news coming out about Jalen Hurts, like now being more questionable than we thought he was going to be, like the splitting reps with Gardner Minshew. Like I have Hurts in a lot of leagues, and I was thinking about rolling him out this week. I know the football team's defense is improved drastically over the last couple weeks, but I thought that his rushing production would be enough. And now I'm more concerned, and now I really think I'm going to pick up Fields and start him over Hurts. Like I want to see kind of things how play out with the news with Jalen Hurts, but I mean, I just feel more confident Fields. I know we talked about these mobile quarterbacks that we're concerned about because of their coming off injuries or they have tougher matchups. Like, Fields doesn't have either of those things. Like, Fields has been a top 10 quarterback the last 3 games he's played in full. He's rushing for over 60 yards per game in his last 5 matchups, and he's playing the Vikings defense. Most fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. So, it like blows my mind that Fields is ECR 20. Like, I literally have no idea why it's like that. I had Fields up, I think, at 13 last week, and to see him still at 20, I have him now at 11. He's probably going to get into the top 10 if I move Hurts down. So, yeah, I mean, Justin Fields, that's going to be my guy Monday night. I'm going to roll with to get to the next round of the playoffs.
I'm so excited when you're talking about it, Andrew, and it makes me wish I played in more single quarterback leagues. Like, this was an option for me. Like, yay, I could start Fields. No, wait, Joe. Everything you play is super flex, pretty much. So, no, that sucks. That I can't
no
pick
Fields
him
for you.
No Fields for me. No, not really. All right, who's the guy you got to sit this week? Who's your absolutely riding the pine guy?
Chuba Hubbard. Yeah, I just think that
good one.
They fall behind. He's dust, so.
All right, there you have it. Yates, how about you, buddy? Your must-start, must-sit.
Really quickly, I'm so glad that we talked about Justin Fields because I meant to talk about him. I alluded to it with the Lamar Jackson conversation of like there's a player that is further down in ECR that I would start over Lamar Jackson this week. That is Justin Fields for me. I have Fields at 11 exactly as well. So his ECR of 20 makes 0 sense. All right, as far as starts of the week for me, I'm going to go with Gabriel Davis, assuming that Emmanuel Sanders is out of this matchup. This is a guy that is just seeing a ton of red zone targets this year, even in a limited capacity. And if we see him start to carve out this role here or step into that role that Emmanuel Sanders was occupying, then Gabriel Davis is going to have himself a fantastic game. And then for me, the sit of the week, at least someone that I am concerned about. I'm not fully sitting him, but that is Aaron Jones. Talked about it earlier with only 8 total opportunities last week against the Baltimore Ravens defense. It's allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing running backs. I do have my concerns.
All right, real quick, boys. Kansas City at the Chargers here for Thursday Night Football. Yates, break down the Austin Eckler situation for us in that backfield for the Chargers.
Yeah, it sounds right now that Brandon Staley said that he's optimistic that Austin Eckler is going to make it back for this game. So, again, on the short week, by the time that you listen to this podcast, you might actually have a little bit more clarity on what's going on with Eckler. But it sounds, as of right now, that he is going to be able to play, obviously leaving that game last week with that ankle injury. So, I think right now we just continue to play Austin Eckler as a mid-range running back 1. In this matchup, we could see points just fly up on the board. Kansas City's defense has been solid here recently. They've started to turn things around, but that's not going to scare me off of Eckler, who's still going to see a ridiculous workload. Assuming that he can't go, I mean, you're playing Justin Jackson as like a mid-range RB3. Maybe Joshua Kelly as a desperation play, but even on Thursday night, like you don't want to make that. You don't want to have to make that decision. So this is one of the situations where if Eckler doesn't play, I'll probably just avoid the backfield.
Andrew Erickson, let's talk about 2 guys named Williams, Darrell Williams and Mike Williams in this game. What's your comfort level of starting either of those 2 guys?
I mean, I think Darrell Williams is like a fine RB3 just because he's evolved in the passing game, and if you kind of find the game script where the Chiefs are trailing, then you could see, okay, Mahomes dumps off Darrell Williams. The Chargers are running a bunch of cover 2. They're like, all right, we can't throw the ball downfield. Let's dump it off to Darrell Williams. Because that, like, CH is really more of the early down guy. Like, CH takes goal line carries, works on early downs, and Darrell Williams is basically the guy they use on 3rd down. So I think at PPR, Darrell Williams makes sense. Still, of the 2 running backs, I would rather play CH straight up because the Chargers' run defense is atrocious. Second most rushing yards allowed to running backs this season. And then with Mike Williams, I mean, this is you can't not play the boom bust receivers in games with like 50 projected total points. Like, this is where you got to play these guys, whether it works or not. Like, that's the process. Like, the process says you got to play Mike Williams here. Has he been disappointing? Yes, but he did go over 100 yards the last time these teams played each other. He had a big game, and they need him. Like, he didn't do a lot last week, but we know he has big play potential. I know that Jalen Guyton isn't always going to catch a long touchdown every single week. Most of the time it's actually going to be Mike Williams that does that. So I think that Mike Williams is still a guy you want to probably play.
All right. Also, don't forget the Start Sit Assistant will be here for you whenever we can't be over at fantasypros.com/myplaybook. So go check that out today. And also check out that autopilot feature that helps you set lineups when you're not able to do so. And it does it smartly and safely just for you. And this is a very important time, obviously, since we're in the playoffs. Also, don't forget about fantasypros.com/chat. If you need to discuss something with us, bring it to our Discord channel. It's free to join, but if you upgrade over there, you have so many options to get into those stages with us, which is basically a radio show where we talk with you, bring you up on stage, and work out some of these processes and some of these big decisions that you've got coming up in your playoffs. Because, look, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is the big moment here for you. So we're going to be here to support you on our Discord, and you can join that once again at fantasypros.com/chat. I want to thank the sponsors of today's show, including TickPick. Don't forget right now, go to tickpick.com/pros and enter that contest to win a huge 5 season ticket packages they're giving away for the 2022 NFL season. Again, that's tickpick.com/pros. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Kyle Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.